Hi there and welcome to this episode 22 of Angelo's Boxing Canvas as endorsed by the World Boxing Council. Firstly, I'd just like to offer an apology as I've not been around as of late. Just had various different things going on in my personal life. But I aim to rectify this for the future and I will be on here every single week from now on. Okay, it's a very sad beginning to the show with the news of the passing of Marvin Hagler. Marvellous Marvin Hagler, as he was legally known as, passed away last month in New Hampshire actually, New Jersey, and he was one of the greatest fighters to have ever laced on the gloves. He was born in 1954. In Newark, New Jersey, and had to endure a lot of racism during those riots there in New Jersey in the 1960s. Marvin turned to boxing at around age of 16, I believe, and Petronelli's guided him to an American national championship as an amateur. Hagler turning pro in 1973. Put together quite a good string of victories. First loss was to a guy called Bobby Boogaloo Watts, and then to Willie the Worm Monroe. Now the Watts defeat was a rather controversial defeat, though the Monroe outscored Hagler fairly clearly. However, Hagler would reverse those defeats and also get another blemish on his record against Sugar Ray Seales, who was the 1972 Olympics gold medalist. However, he would reverse that blemish against Seales, and eventually, after beating Benny Briscoe amongst others, Hagler would be propelled into the top 10. He got his chance against Vito Antuofermo of Italy on November the 30th, 1979, and that was the same show as Sugar Ray Leonard versus Wilfredo Benitez. A little bit more about Sugar Ray Leonard later. Hagler boxed very well against Antuofermo, a very strong guy, and the fight went to 15 rounds and it was declared a draw. Hagler felt robbed, as did many ringsiders and those viewing at home, and felt that Hagler should have been justifiably given the verdict and become the new world middleweight champ. Antuofermo in his next fight lost to Britain's Alan Minter, and Minter, making one more defence of that title against Antuofermo in an immediate return, then found himself here against Marvin Hagler on September 27th, 1980 at Wembley Arena. Now we're going to take in this now a little bit of film from that fight and also from some other fights of Marvin Hagler's. So yes, the fight against Alan Minter, Hagler's second try at the title. Minter, as I just mentioned, had defeated Vito Antuofermo for the middleweight championship, and this was Minter's second defence. Now, Hagler would go on and take the title from Minter in the third round, cutting up the Englishman very badly. Hagler was sadly robbed of the victory thanks to chaotic scenes at Wembley Arena that particular evening, when a few certain mindless racist morons weren't happy with Marvin becoming the world middleweight champion, and as he was about to put his arms in the air, they started to throw water bottles at the ring, and plastic beer bottles actually, and he was absolutely had to be obviously cradled by his cornermen, and that crowning moment was robbed by Marvin Hagler, and robbed from Marvin Hagler, and Hagler, it wasn't just him who suffered abuse, it was also his wife at the time, Bertha, and he vowed after that never ever to come back to box in England ever again, and you could hardly blame him. However, as I say, Hagler, after all those years, 50 odd fights he had to get this to the world top 10 and to fight his way up, all those years of dedication and finally reaching the peak of that mountain, the middleweight champion of the world, only to have his crowning moment robbed from him. However, some months later in Hagler's hometown of Brockton, Massachusetts, Marvin was given a quiet ceremony where he was presented with the championship belts to try and compensate for that crowning moment that was taken from him so unfairly at Wembley that particular September evening. Just taking in some film now from the Roberto Duran title defence. Prior to this fight, Hagler had made several defences, including a 6th round stoppage over one of Alan Minter's fellow countrymen, Tony Sibson. Hagler, obviously, as I mentioned before, plainly refused to go to England to box ever again. So obviously that fight took place in Worcester, Massachusetts, in Marvin Hagler's near Marvin Hagler's native hometown. He absolutely demolished Sibson and showed the void between world class and obviously European class. Though not taking nothing away from Sibson, he was a world class fighter in his own right, but Hagler was just that a couple of notches better class-wise than Sibson. Hagler obviously had defended a couple of times against Fulgencio Oblamias of Venezuela, who would go on himself to become a WBA super middleweight champion. Hagler destroyed Oblamias, and it was thanks to the governing bodies that he was forced into a rematch with a guy he had beaten fairly soundly already. The rematch in San Remo in '82, Hagler demolished Oblamias once more with a devastating right hand, putting paid to Oblamias' championship challenge. One fight Hagler did reverse, which was the draw against Vito Antuofermo, when he stopped Vito after 5 rounds in the Boston Garden, and even managing to floor Antuofermo, which was an achievement in itself. Coming up against Syrian hardman Mustafa Hamsho in Chicago, Illinois, the October of '81, stopping Hamsho in 11 rounds. Another great fight, another great defence. Hagler in 1982, as I just mentioned, beat Oblamias in that forced defence, if you like, and by the governing bodies, and then took on William Caveman Lee, destroying him in 67 seconds of the first round. Hagler, as I mentioned before, took on Tony Sibson and beat him with Scipion. Hagler obviously was the WBA and WBC, the undisputed champion, but beating Scipion, he gained the newly created IBF World Middleweight Championship belt, the International Boxing Federation. Hagler's next defence, as you're seeing here, is against Roberto Duran. Now this was a very, very good fight. Duran obviously coming from lightweight all the way up to light middle, winning that championship the previous June to this fight, destroying Davey Moore. This became a bit of a sort of like one for the connoisseur more than anything, and in its own right it's a great fight, make no mistake about that. However, Hagler would win a decision over Duran over 15 rounds, and the following June Duran would find himself in against a guy called Tommy the Hitman Earns. Now, Earns was mooted to box Hagler originally in 1982, but pulled out in Ontario, Canada, of all places, but pulled out due to breaking a finger. That fight was never ever rescheduled until, that is, 1985. However, the fight with Duran and Earns absolutely outclassed, destroyed Duran in 2 rounds, and obviously many of the American fight public and fans around the world were obviously forgetting that stars make fights, and they were feeling that the way Earns had handled Duran easily, yet how Hagler had struggled with Duran, that this was going to be some fight between Hagler and Tommy Earns. We'll just move over to that fight very quickly. Yes, the Earns fight then, and this one is one of the most anticipated fights of the golden era that was the 1980s. Earns, as I was just saying, coming off that great win against Roberto Duran, though his last actual fight, so to be pedantic, was against Fred Hutchins, as you can notice there by the graphic on the screen. But it was that fight against Duran that really, rocked the boxing world, the win over him, the way he beat Duran with such ease, stopping him inside 2 one-sided rounds the previous June of 1984. Earns had only had the one loss on his record going into this against Sugar Ray Leonard. Now, this fight was billed as the fight, and it was just that. I mean, it was just amazing. The first 3 minutes, the first round is arguably the greatest 3 minutes of boxing. Watch any fight you like, you will not find a more action-packed round than that. And the thing is, they had 14 more rounds after that, so people watching from ringside or live around the world, on cinemas or at home, they must have just thought, wow, this is do they not realise this is another 14 rounds of this? But this was really a great fight. Just going to take in some of that first round now, and it was non-stop pretty much from the word go, and it was just amazing, just a great fight. And this is pretty much, in my opinion, the fight that, to me is great, is Marvin Hagler's greatest victory. It was just an amazing fight, non-stop, as you can see here in that legendary first round. Absolute war of attrition, and there was more twists and turns in this fight, because the second round things slowed down considerably. But could you blame either of these guys? I think after that first round, whatever the finish was going to be, everybody was going to go home pretty, fairly, that they, happy that they had got their value for money. However, in the third round, something happened that Hagler didn't want to happen, and that was himself sustaining a terrible cut, almost like a horizontal kind of, like a an angle the cut was, and that blood was pouring into Hagler's eyes, obscuring his vision, when the referee, Richard Steele, called a timeout, and Hagler was literally a minute, maybe one round away. You can see looks like he's got cut there. But he was literally minutes away, possibly a round away from losing. Yeah, he's got the cut there, losing his middleweight championship of the world, and he needed to pull out all the stops basically. And here it is, just as things are livening up again. The referee just parts them there, and you'll see him in a minute call a timeout. There you go, and Hagler's championship is slipping away here. I mean, he's literally, as I say, a minute, maybe a round away from losing the championship, and he needs to do something now to turn it around. And this is where the drama really begins. And Earns is just boxing, and Hagler needs obviously a stoppage now to retain his championship. And Hagler shows the true mark of a world champion here, of a genuine undisputed champion. And what a great fighter he was to actually turn it around, pretty much straight away. And you'll see this right hand, and there you go. And Earns is, he's all over the place, and there you go. What a finish! And Earns, he got up on very rubbery legs, and the referee had no option but to stop this fight. And it was this fight that had obviously been something of a landmark in Hagler's career and as champion. So what an amazing victory that for Marvin Hagler. Marvin would go on to defend the championship one more time against John the Beast Mugabe, a Ugandan based in England. Stopping Mugabe in the 11th round, Hagler was contemplating retirement. It looked like his best days were clearly behind him, and you know, it's just one of those things. 1 second, please. I just got to do this camera because it's a little bit. That's better. That's better. Yeah. So you know, that was pretty much. Hagler was on the verge of, you know, he was slipping, and you know, it looked like Marvin really should be contemplating retirement, which he was. But it was one night on at his mansion in New Jersey where he was sitting with his wife at the time, Bertha, and there was on an hammock, and he was talking about retiring, and it was actually Bertha who made him continue to fight. She said, I don't know, she said, I'd like you to get that skinny, and I can't say the word, you know, get him Marvin, and obviously the guy she was talking about was Sugar Ray Leonard. Now, Leonard was ringside for the Mugabe defence, and he was with a guy called Michael J. Fox, who's quite a famous actor, and, you know, stars of the films Back to the Future, Teen Wolf, etc. And he said, I can beat him, you know. Whether or not he saw there was obviously a lot of chinks in Hagler's armour, you know, and obviously Marvin, as I say, he was slipping, you know, he wasn't the same Marvin Hagler from the Ernst fight, you know, maybe that fight took a lot out of him, but we'll never know, but, you know, the Ernst fight, but anyhow, she said, go get that, you know, go get him, and he did, and the fight was signed late 1986, and the rest, as they say, is history, and he